I'm not trying to impress anybody. This is my real story. Eagle Scout, student of the year, 5th, 8th, 12th grade. That was when my whole life started to really spiral out of control. You ready for this?
Ready.
Oh, I am addicted to pornography. It was like throwing gasoline on the fire. I had become this almost purveyor of chaos. It was just miserable. I hate my reality right now. I decided, you know what? I need to make a change. It took me years to use words like pornography and, sexual addiction. Dude, it's been insane. Dang, these are the guys I need to be hanging out with. My life started to get a lot cleaner and a lot better. Who is that? He goes, I don't know. I was like, she's cute. I ghosted her for 6 weeks. Do I know you? And I was like, oh, I got to marry this girl.
So now being married, what's one or two things you wish you had known when you were still single? Okay, here's what it's like on the other side. I feel like this pedestal almost that single people in general are, okay, once I get married, everything will be good.
Here's my hot take. The thing that was not communicated to me about sex before marriage was the reality that I've just lived through. Was that one day...
Challenge yourself constantly.
You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Hey, it's Carlton French. Welcome to the Single Man Podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Hamilton Winters, this week. Hamilton, how you doing, man?
Doing well, even better now that I'm with you. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming over today, Hamilton, and being on the podcast. I am encouraged by your story and our friendship, and I was thinking about who to have on, and you're one of the first people I reached out to. So I'm excited to have you here today, and I know the audience and single men will be encouraged through your story and just our conversation. So thanks for coming on. A quick introduction of Hamilton. He's 28 years old and lives in Buckhead in Atlanta, Georgia, is from West Monroe, Louisiana, and has been the young adults director at Buckhead Young Adults for the last year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And used to be in the business world. You're a pilot.
Yep.
And had a whole business around aviation, and you loved just being adventurous, which is awesome. Have skydived in Dubai.
Yeah. Wild story.
And so awesome to have you on, Hamilton. I also, your relationship status. So you are somewhat newly married.
Yep.
And that was about a year ago.
Yeah.
Tell me.
October of 22.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so I'm interested to hear your story, and why I wanted you to come on is how you dated kind of in a worldly sense previously, right? And now have a godly marriage, and I think that'll be interesting for the audience to hear as well. So anything that I left out that you want to have the audience know about?
Yeah. Just a normal dude,
Yeah.
But it's an honor that you would think to bring me on the podcast, essentially, or especially given that I don't necessarily fit the target audience in my current state, but I was a single man at one point, and can certainly remember back to those days, and that was a very formative time in my life, and so excited to share the good and probably even more so the bad that God has been very gracious to me through it all. So
yeah, and I know that was what one thing I shared when we were talking about coming on was like, what do you wish you knew if you could talk to your younger self? And me too. Like we've, both have similar stories almost and have made similar mistakes in a way. So I think it's going to encourage the audience to hear from you today. So cool. In terms of your last week, Hamilton, what's kind of been something that's been going well, something that's been a little hard that you've been working through, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, no, great question and very pertinent, especially given this week.
Yeah.
We sold our house on Friday, which was huge, huge blessing, definitely an answered prayer. Now the way that it all went down was not how we would have expected it. I don't remember who said this, but in some seminar that I went to, the guy said a lot of our current tensions or frustrations happen to be the result of answered prayers. And I'm like, wow, I did pray for us to sell our house. I guess I should have been a little bit more specific on how that whole thing should have gone down.
Right.
But it did not go smoothly. Long story short, we had a lot of issues with the house that we thought had been fixed before we bought the house. Come to find out while we're selling the house that some of those issues did not get fixed and now are our financial responsibility. But through the chaos and through the things I would not have asked for, there were some moments with some people that I really got to witness to that through it that were pretty amazed by our composure through the stress that I think might have been the reason why we ended up having to go through it. So all in all, while it was expensive, when you think about the treasures that we're asked to store up in heaven, rather than on earth, I think that, I can earn the money back, those witnessing opportunities, and who knows what the fruit will be of those, are far exceeding whatever financial value I put into my house. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Great perspective. Like some of the workers or something, or
yeah, I mean, everybody involved, whether it's the business side of things and the transaction, or it's the buyer, or it's our family, or whoever it is. Some situations in life, especially the more unfortunate they are. That's the joy, right, of the Christian life, is knowing that things aren't eternal, that they're temporal, because we have something that is eternal. And that's, the love of God and the salvation of Christ, that like, hey, this might be the biggest thing in your world, but it's not the biggest thing in my world.
Yeah.
The biggest thing in my world is Jesus. And so the house thing, it's kind of sucks for now. And so for people that would get all bent out of shape about this, and they're like, how are you not furious? How are you not, wanting to sue somebody? I'm like, it's not the biggest thing.
Yeah.
My witnesses and the fact that I'm in your circle of influence, and this might be a really great way for us to have a conversation about something that's a little bit more important than just the house.
Yeah.
But the house allowed that door to be opened is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. So sorry you had to go through that, but maybe it was for the best, maybe.
I don't know that I'll find out this side of heaven, but maybe. So
yeah,
I got to hope for it.
Right. So
otherwise it's just a kind of sucky situation. So.
Right. That's like the high and low all wrapped into one. Almost.
It's all just wrapped into one. So there's a lot of silver linings despite it looking like a piece of coal. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
Love it.
Yeah. And
so Hamilton, wanted to have you share a little bit about your story and how you came to know the Lord, and growing up in West Monroe, Louisiana. Did it start there, or what's kind of the childhood like? Yeah.
Good question. I did grow up in West Monroe, most famously known for Duck Dynasty, of course. Their pond, like Sadie and her family's pond, overflows into our pond. So we're like legitimately neighbors.
Yeah, I think I saw you in one of the episodes, right?
Maybe in the background. It's hard not to be. For a few years, they were lighting it up. Really great family, really great show. But that's kind of what people know my hometown for. Yeah, I grew up in church. My mom has been a believer for her entire life. Grew up in a family of believers. My dad became a believer only after he met my mom, and my mom led my dad to
really?
Christ.
Wow.
So yeah, he had everything materially, but he never had peace. She had nothing materially, but she had peace. And he was like, I don't know what that is or where you get it, but I don't have it. And I've been searching for it my whole life. And she said, well, his name is Jesus, and I'd love to introduce you. And so He got baptized a couple of years before I was born. And then I was raised in a pretty contemporary Southern Baptist church, really good church experience. I was a very straight and narrow type kid, Eagle Scout, student of the year, 5th, 8th, 12th grade, just an achiever. I'm an Enneagram 3. I think a lot of that comes from my parents just saying, there's no reason why you can't go and do really great things. And so I wanted to make them proud. And I was always a heavier kid. So I played football and sports growing up, but in 8th grade, I don't even know if you know this. In 8th grade, I got injured playing football.
Okay.
And I fractured my back in a couple of places.
Oh, wow.
And I was already kind of a huskier, maybe is a polite term,
Right.
kid. And I kept eating like a lineman, but I wasn't working out like one. And so throughout freshman, sophomore, junior year of high school, I just got bigger and bigger. And I weighed about 245 pounds. And my waist was a 40-inch waist. I mean, that's
Wow.
on my frame. It's not, a healthy
While
place
you were
to
in
be.
high school.
While I was in high school.
Yeah.
And, I had knee trouble and back trouble, and my confidence had gone down a lot. And so I decided, you know what, I need to make a change. It was funny, that same year, junior year of high school, my pastor in West Monroe at our church, he asked me if I would share my testimony for this student camp that we were doing on video, whatever.
Yeah.
And I vividly remember saying in this video, like, I really don't have much of a testimony. Like, God's like prevented me from having a lot of like mistakes. I haven't, really strayed from the narrow path. And it was almost like at that moment, I started writing my testimony. So that summer between junior and senior year of high school, I had committed to losing some weight, and I lost 50 pounds that summer. So I came back to school and I was like 190. Okay. That's a big shift. I went from a 40 waist to a 32 waist.
Wow.
And I walked in and nobody recognized me. I was like a totally different person. And
How'd you do that?
just diet change. It's amazing what can happen if you don't eat 2 spicy chicken sandwich combos from Chick-fil-A for lunch, know? But that was my reality. And so it became this thing that was almost an identity for me. People would be like, oh my gosh, you look so good. And I was like, oh, I like this. Like, this feels great. And I became addicted to the affirmation and the compliments. And it really led to me, I would say, getting into almost like an eating disorder. Like, I would starve myself just so I'd lose more weight to get more, compliments. And so you can see how unhealthy that would be.
Yeah.
But really the worst part about it was the way that girls looked at me for the first time. Girls that I had always been interested in, but had never been interested in me.
Right.
And I was like, oh, wow, like, this is within my reach, So, and I knew that I had the charisma to be able to present myself as the guy you wanted your son to hang out with and the guy you wanted your daughter to date.
Yeah.
While also, living a totally different life without anybody knowing about it. And I also knew I was convincing enough to where I could kind of keep it a secret. And even if people knew about it, that they wouldn't say anything about it. And so, dude, my senior year of high school, that was when I became sexually active. And that was when my whole life started to really spiral out of control. I had been introduced to pornography a long time before that. But it was like all of the fantasies that I built up in my own mind and in private could now become reality. And that was a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
So
Right.
go to college,
Yeah.
in Monroe, Louisiana, Monroe. I went there on scholarship, did 3 years there, fraternity life, still going to church on Sundays with my parents, but, I was dating a girl in college and, we were sexually active, and it just had become the way that relationships worked, right?
Right.
We both got what we wanted. She got love and affirmation, and I got, sex.
Right.
So throughout that relationship leading into, I went to Ole Miss for grad school, and that behavior, like, it was like throwing gasoline on the fire because it was a 1-year program. And I knew that every day my pickup line got better and better because it's like, I'm only here for 6 months. I'm only here for 2 months. I'm only here for 2 weeks. And
Right.
for the type of people that are just looking for a quick hit, like, oh, that sounds great. I never have to see you again. We can just use each other. Like, great. And I got a job offer and moved to Atlanta and moved to Buckhead because the one person I knew in Atlanta who was hiring me for my job knew I was into the party scene. And so that's all he knew about me.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, you need to live in Buckhead. And so I was like, well, where's the most popular bars? And he was like, oh, the dive bars, like in Buckhead. He goes, cool. I said, I think I want to live there. It was the closest apartment building to all the dive bars because I was like, I'm going to save a fortune going out. You
Right.
know, I can walk to the bars.
Right. No Uber.
No any of that. So my first like year in Atlanta, I moved here to sell commercial lighting, which is just as sexy as it sounds. Not very. And I didn't have any friends, didn't know anything about the city, was living a very unhealthy life, going out to the bar probably 3, 4, 5 times a week, just getting blackout, you know, waking up next to people I don't know after nights I can't remember. And
Yeah.
it was just miserable. So
Did you feel miserable when you were in it, or was it like, okay,
it was
I
fun.
thought I was enjoying this?
Yeah, it was fun for a while. Just like it had been fun for a long time, but it started to become less fun the more chaos it seemed like there was in my life, especially when it came to relationships. And like, you know, I had become this like almost purveyor of chaos. Like I was causing chaos just so I had something to like think about. And like, it was almost like playing kind of a puppet master of like, oh, what kind of situations can I get myself into and out of? And just, it's toxic.
Something
you know?
like have some excitement in your life, or
Yeah,
something
dude,
like
like,
that was giving you joy almost.
Can you imagine being so depraved that that's what you do?
Yeah.
That was me, you know, but still on Facebook, I'm the guy that you have a tremendous amount of respect for because you don't know that I'm living this whole entire life. I'm 8 hours away from home. Only person that knows the true measure of depravity that I'm experiencing is my roommate who's seeing it. And after a while, he didn't even want to live with me anymore. It's like, dang.
Wow. Yeah.
You know? So, I'll kind of tell you my professional journey and then we'll go back to the personal journey.
Yeah.
So I'm selling lighting. I hate it. I'm getting kicked out and cussed out of warehouses and office spaces trying to sell light bulbs to whoever will buy them from me. I was not trained. The company that I worked for, although the guy that hired me is my best friend to this day, the company that we worked for was not great. And so about 10 months in or so, I don't like myself. I don't like my job. I don't like the city of Atlanta. I don't like, you know, my friends who I had made, which were just friends to go out to the bar with.
Right.
And so I'm like, I need to find something to take my mind off of how much I hate my reality right now. And so I decided I was going to go learn how to fly and become a pilot because that had been a regret of mine. My childhood best friend and I promised that we would become pilots together, and he did, and I had not.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, you know what? There's an airport right down the road. So I went and I became a pilot, and I was really good at it. So much so that I quit my job to become a commercial pilot. And
How old were you when you quit your job?
I was 23, 22, 23.
Okay.
And so I'm almost done with my pilot training, and the manager of the flight school comes up to me, and younger guy, and he's like, hey man, you got a business degree, right? I was like, yeah. He goes, cool. I'm the manager of the flight school. I have been for the last 3.5 years. Like the guy I work for is really difficult, and he's taking kind of all the fun out of this. Like, do you want to start a flight school and maybe like try to compete against him and put him out of business? And I was like, that's bold. Like, I don't have any real business experience. And he was like, it's okay. Like, I kind of know the ropes. I just need somebody to help me like create it, like make it happen.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, sure. So I helped him and we built a flight school. And honestly, it was so fun that it took away from my flight training. And I was like, wow, this entrepreneurial thing, like this business building thing is really fun.
Yeah.
I had created the branding and all this other stuff. And so the guy that hired me for the lighting job, for the last job that I quit, very long story short, he and his wife have a relationship with a marketing agency, and they were willing to give him a free branding session for his new business that he was starting. And they needed a place to host the meeting. And so I was like, yeah, you can come host it at the airport, you know, in our flight school offices.
Yeah.
So they host the meeting. I sit in, and the guy is a consultant. He's doing all these cool like exercises. And he looks at me, and he's like, hey, this tagline exercise, like, what do you think the tagline should be? I have a marketing degree. I was like, oh, well, I think it should be XYZ. And he was like, dang, that's really good. And he asked me a couple other times throughout the session. And by the end of it, we grabbed like lunch about a week later, and he hired me on as a strategist. And he was like, I love what you've done with the flight school. I think our clients could really use your eye on things. And so I became a consultant for 2 years in the marketing world, stepped away from the flight school, and it continued to grow with my business partner. And so I've got this job. I'm a consultant. I'm loving it. I'm Don Draper on Mad Men. I'm wearing turtlenecks and doing podcasts. And
Yeah.
I get offered the chief strategist role. in fall of 2020. I'm 25 years old. It was a 6-figure job, like on paper, the perfect job for
Right.
me.
Okay.
right?
I made it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go back.
Yeah.
So I'm in Atlanta. I'm, sowing my wild oats. I'm living just a depraved life. And around that time, a friend invited me to go to Passion City Church. And so I showed up to the church and I was like, you know what? I can always go back to church. Never intended to necessarily need it. But, I feel like I need it. And so I went back to church and I experienced church as I had not seen it before. And it was approachable. It was cool. I recognized Crowder and I recognized Louie and I was like, oh, this is like cool. And it's right in my backyard. Like, I guess I can start going here. Plus my mom will be really happy that I'm going to church again, So started showing up week after week after week, still going out, but week after week after week. And I started serving on the shuttles team. And that was a lot of fun too. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So I went out a little bit less, but still going out. One of the guys on the shuttles team, his name's Ed, older guy, one of my good friends to this day. Was like, hey, why don't you come to this men's event? It's 2 free beers and a gospel message. And like, you like free beer, right? I was like, who doesn't like free beer? Yeah, of course. So I showed up, John Smoltz was speaking. And at the end, they had an opportunity to do a Friday morning Bible study with these same guys. And I was like, wait, you can drink a beer and love Jesus at the same time? Like those two things were kind of, foreign to me.
Right.
And I showed up on a Friday morning and these guys were incredible what they knew about the Bible. I was so intimidated. This is like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm so outclassed. And I asked stupid questions, even though I'd been to vacation Bible school and been to all this other stuff.
Right.
And they didn't make me feel stupid. And they met me where I was and walked with me towards who God created me to be. And I was like, dang, these guys, we were all single. We were just trying to figure it out. These are the guys I need to be hanging out with. So my friends from the bars started to fade, which meant my time at the bar started to fade. And over time, I started hanging out with these guys and my life started to get a lot cleaner and a lot better. And about 6 months into being at that Bible study, the guy that led it was like, hey, you got 2 options. We really like having you here. You either need to quit coming or you need to lead a table. And I'm like, what? He goes, you need to quit coming or you need to lead a table. I'm like, well, this is the highlight of my week. I don't want to quit coming. He goes, cool, you're leading a table next week. I'm like, I don't know the Bible. And he was like, it's okay. You know how to ask questions? Cool. Show up and lead a table. And so I started leading a table and dude, it grew and it split and it grew and it split and it grew and it split. And these guys that were coming on Friday mornings, their growth, their spiritual growth, like I couldn't explain it. The spiritual growth of my own life, I couldn't explain.
Yeah.
Like the things that were desires of my heart at one point in time had just kind of started to fade away. And I was learning more about the scriptures and just like, so that led to an opportunity to go to the Holy Land. And so I went and that just radically transformed my view of the Bible. And the year later I took a seminary class because these guys that I was in the table with were asking such good questions that I took the seminary class. And at the end of the seminary class, I was like, I think that I need to go to seminary and get another master's degree. And that was the same month that I was offered the dream job promotion. And I turned it down to go to seminary and work at the church. So yeah, dude, wild. Never thought I'd work at a church. Never thought I'd go to seminary. I do work at a church now. Nothing wrong with it. Just never thought it was for me.
Yeah.
I've gone to seminary and like, dude, it's been insane the path that God has had me on. But I couldn't have seen it going forward, but looking back, it makes total sense. So that's a long story. So sorry for the extra details there, but I feel like it's all just, I hope that you guys can resonate to this because I don't know what kind of journey you're on, but it's probably not linear. Most of our journeys aren't. Right. And so just trust that whatever God has for you, when you look back, I think it'll make a lot more sense. All you have to do is worry about putting one foot in front of the other. So,
yeah, so great, man. I think it's interesting how you like kind of almost knew something was missing. It sounds like when you were going out and like living the life and doing what you wanted to do, I guess. Yeah. Like is that how it felt? Like something was missing and then you're like, okay, maybe I'll go try this church thing out again or.
Yeah. I I don't know, man. And probably from the outside or people, and I've had people say this, they're like, there was always like something. Like it was like you weren't fully like ready to really let go and just enter into this full life of depravity. Like you were still hanging on. And never did I question faith or who God was. I had accepted it as something that could just be nominal for me. I could go and live my life, and as long as I upkept the outside, facade that I had it together and that I believed, and that I was good. And my life had just become so chaotic. And as well as anybody, God is a God of order. He brings order to chaos. I mean, even Genesis 1, that's the creation story. He took something that was chaotic and he brought order to it. And look at my life. There was order and I had brought chaos to it. And it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And it wasn't benefiting me or anybody else. I was hurting people around me. And so I knew something had to give, but thank God I knew where I could go back to, which is my biggest encouragement to people with kids is like, just get your kids to church.
Yeah.
Because they might not pay attention. They might be, goofing off. They might not show up every once in a while, but like when they are there, that's a spiritual deposit.
Yeah.
And so had I not known where to go, who knows what I would have turned to?
Right.
Maybe I would have turned to substance abuse. I mean, like a lot of people do. Thankfully, I knew that wasn't the route because I knew that I could always go back to church. But for you, if you've had a church hurt situation or, maybe you weren't raised in church, so you don't even have a context for that.
Yeah.
I would just encourage you to try it out. I mean, that's kind of what I do for a living is making a church environment approachable to people who would never show up on a Sunday morning.
Right.
Like, hey, let's figure this thing out. I'm not here because I know all the answers. I'm here because I'm trying to figure it out like you, but I have a really good direction and his name's Jesus. So
yeah,
get your kids to church, man. That's it's been a saving grace for me.
Let's say there's a guy listening, Hamilton, he maybe grew up in church, but he has fallen away as well. And okay, maybe this guy Hamilton's making some sense. Like, sounds like it's kind of worked out well for him. Like, what would even be a first step that you would recommend someone to take? Like, how do I don't have any Christian friends. I don't even know where any churches are around me. What would you recommend someone try to do? Yeah,
that's a great question. I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but if you're in Atlanta, I'd love to meet you. That's kind of what we do with Buckhead Young Adults is, we meet people where they are and walk with them towards who God created them to be. And, we focus on helping people experience the city, find their people, and grow their faith. And most of the people, especially someone like what you're talking about, their felt need isn't necessarily spiritual at first. While we know it's spiritual deep down, their felt need is, I don't have friends. Yeah. And so we need to meet that need first so that once they find friends, and hopefully within our environment, it's quality friends.
Right.
To where they say, okay, well, I've experienced the city with now having found my friends. So what's that third part? Well, now grow your faith. And faith is something that you grow in community. It's not something that you grow individually. While there is a part of individual, personal, and private practice, right? It's worked out in a community of believers, which we call the church. So I wouldn't be focused so much on finding a church as much as I would just finding the church, Like there's a lot of different, denominations, and there's a lot of confusion around like, oh, like what's the right theology or what's it? Hey man, like maybe just start by coming around, doing a little bit of research on your own, but just like meeting some people and finding people that are cool enough to hang out with, but also have this, something's different about you. You have something that you're not living day to day. You're living for something eternal. And so I'd love to meet you, but if you live somewhere else, I would just encourage you to find, a church nearby or an organization that seems like it's faith-based. And there's a lot of great parachurch ministries that can help kind of bridge the gap between someone that's fully out of church, unchurched, de-churched, trying to be rechurched, and then coming back. But if you have a church hurt situation, I'd also love to talk with you about that because it's something I rub up against every single week, and it breaks my heart. But the church is a imperfect vessel sailing a perfect journey with a perfect captain. And so it's going to take on water sometimes, Yeah. But you got to have people on board that are willing to, shovel some of that water out and keep her afloat, because he says, even the gates of hell will not overcome the church. And so I think it's a pretty steady ship, but like I said, we take on water sometimes. So
yeah, that's great. I think one thing when we first met too, was just how you encouraged me through like some church hurt that I had, and just you encouraged me to, whenever I want to come to an event, like show up. And yeah, I really appreciated that about you. So
Yeah, bro.
I think it's something that people hurt people, like ultimately Jesus doesn't hurt people. And so people can become like jaded or blinded, like, oh, the church did this to me or Jesus did this to me, but it was just someone that is living in sin that is at the church ultimately.
Well, and thinking back on my story, I hurt people.
Yeah.
Even when I was in the church. And who knows what church hurt situations I might have caused. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But,
this guy's a Christian and he's doing XYZ, like, yeah.
Yeah. And we see it in other people, and it's so much easier for us to notice now, right? Than it was for us to notice then. But it helps me have grace for somebody that's like, hey, man, I don't know if you know this, but like you're hurting your own witness, like posting that you're at church and social media, and the literal next thing is you black out drunk at the bar. Like, you gotta choose, man.
Right.
And had somebody not loved me enough to have hard conversations with me, and these guys, Friday mornings, like find some brothers, maybe don't even start with the biblical or theological aspect. Just start with 2 or 3 guys that you love enough that have similar struggles as you, and just form an accountability group. And the scriptures are incredible guide for that. And I would absolutely encourage you to do it from a biblical worldview and from the scriptures. But at the end of the day, like, finding those brothers to link arms with, getting to the marriage part of the conversation.
Yeah.
While dating definitely prepared me for marriage, I would say that more so being a single man with other single men prepared me for marriage more so than even dating. Because of the things that we ironed out in ourselves. And I say in ourselves, that the Holy Spirit ironed out in us, but in the community of single men that I didn't want my wife to have to deal with.
Right.
Yeah. So what are you doing now that if you are going to pursue marriage, that, it's going to take a big load off your wife for having ironed that out ahead of time, because she's going to iron it out one way or the other. So, you might as well take care of it up front. And, it takes a long time to rewire something when you've wired it for years and years and years a certain way. So,
Give
it time.
What are, so, okay, you find the church and you're plugged in, decide to go to seminary. Now you're leading the young adult ministry at Buckhead Church. At what point were you like, okay, maybe I should start dating now? Or was that just like, did you ever like take time off, or was it just like, all right, I'm just always kind of open to it, and then you end up meeting your wife?
Yeah, I don't know that I probably more so decided to start dating and stop just like, messing around.
Yeah.
It wasn't I'm not dating and now I am. It was like, hey, I'm going to get serious about it. I'm not just looking for the next hookup. I'm looking for somebody that I want to be, the wife of my dreams and the mother of my kids,
Yeah.
And that's a totally different woman than the one that you're trying to take home from the bar,
Right.
While I'm not saying that you can't meet her there, you just probably aren't, I always tell people, if you're going out looking for a blue marlin and you go fishing in a sewage pond, don't complain to me that you're not finding blue marlin. In the sewage pond. That's not where they swim, like go to the ocean where you'll find the blue marlin and make sure that your bait's right. And then maybe you'll find a blue marlin, all you're going to find in a sewage pond is bottom feeders at anything, and everybody's a child of God. And so to call anybody a bottom feeder, don't, take that for what it's worth. But at the end of the day, like I was that bottom feeder,
right?
It's not just what I found, it's who found me and what they found in me. And so it's like, wow, to quote, Andy Stanley, it's like, become the person you're looking for is looking for.
Yeah.
We're so focused on the person we're looking for that we forget that the person that we're looking for isn't looking for us in our current state.
Yeah.
That was a tough pill for me to swallow. Like, why would somebody that I'm proud to bring home to my parents be proud to bring me home to their parents? Because if you're not going to be willing to become the person that they would be proud of, don't expect to get anybody that you're proud of.
Yeah.
So
when you realized that, what were like some of the first things you were like, okay, I need to shape up in these couple areas?
Great question. So I would say it was kind of a long process And it took a lot of time. So if you're looking for something quick, this is probably not the journey you want to take. This is a very long process. I think the first thing that I needed to cut out on was just the kind of debauchery, if you will, going out. There was nothing good happened at the bars. Nothing good. I could justify it all I wanted to, but anywhere you're coming home at 3, 4 a.m. after a night out and you wake up the next morning and you don't even remember what you did and you have to figure it out by looking on your phone to see what kind of stupid pictures you took, like what are you doing?
Right.
Like, come on, there's something deeper there. And I need you to ask yourself, like, hey, am I going to the bar to grab a drink and to socialize, or am I going there to like cope with something that's much deeper? And I was coping with something that was much deeper. And so I needed to eventually get down to the root cause of this. But the surface wound was like, oh, I'm going out, 4 or 5 nights a week. It's like, oh, I could probably stand to not do that. So it took time, but it went from 4 to 5 to 2 to 3 to 1 to 2 to, man, I hadn't gone out in a while, and my friends, I needed to get rid of my friends that were not interested in growing with me, and that's not to say drop them, because we've all met Christians like that, right? When they follow Jesus and then they either, completely drop you, or they at worst like shun you or judge you, for not living that life. I try not to shun or judge anybody. I just, you're making investments wherever you go. And I wanted to invest in people that were investing in me.
Yeah.
And so finding those right friends, I think was huge for me. And the Friday morning Bible study guys, like that was my community and still is.
Yeah.
Like, that group grew from 10 to, we have over 100 guys that meet at Sweetwater Brewing every single Friday morning. So again, if you're in town Friday morning, would love to have you stop by there. But those guys, man, the right friends, you have no idea. They determine the quality and direction of your lives, of your life. And so I'd say that those were the early decisions that needed to go. But it eventually worked down to, I need to stop, just chasing after pleasure and start chasing after like purpose. Like my purpose is to find someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with, potentially, not just, the next night's pleasure. And that was a big shift, which ultimately helped me to work down to like, oh, I am addicted to pornography. And this is the outworking of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm listening to rap music, and if you're a rap fan, like that's fine. I just realized that whatever goes in my ears was coming out my mouth.
Yeah.
And was also coming out as actions. And when you're listening to music where it's talking about defiling women and, using words that are just downright disgusting, in my opinion, I became numb to all that stuff. It was just it's what I'm listening to at the bar. So that's the actions that I'm going to live out in reality. And I stopped listening to that kind of music, and I stopped putting myself in those types of positions. And, to be honest, it's been a struggle for years to overcome lust and, pornography addiction, because it's right there in front of you at all times.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it without my accountability group of guys that struggle with the same thing. And without the Holy Spirit just being active in our lives and working in us in ways that we can't work things out on our own. So in our weakness, we get to really see his strength. So
yeah,
I hope that's some tangible ways.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the part about how you've been able to find that accountability group and like find a couple friends that like want to talk about it with you. Yeah, that's something that I really struggled with, where I feel like I didn't have any friends. I thought I was just struggling all on my own. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm the only one with the problem with masturbation or pornography addiction. Like no one else is going through any of this stuff. And like when you start talking about it, it actually creates more vulnerability with other people too. Yep.
You start to realize that not only are you not the only one, you're part of the majority. Like if I were to ask a group of our age guys, probably any guys, but specifically our age guys, like, hey, raise your hand, how many of you struggle with pornography? You would probably get about half of them raise their hand. That doesn't mean that half of them are struggling. That just means the other half are lying to you.
Right.
Right. You just got the honest ones to raise their hand, like when you put a device in the hand of a child under the age of 10 that has unfettered access to the internet, we essentially in many ways were a social experiment. And these are the effects of that. And so my hope is that we can look to the generation behind us and say, you don't have to worry about that. Like, don't do what we did, like I've seen it all, and there's some bad stuff out there, and I still am living with some of the consequences of that.
Yeah.
But, that's the lie of the enemy is you're the only one. You don't need to tell anybody. That's embarrassing. That's shameful. Like the only person that will shame you for the same thing that he just convinced you to commit is Satan. Like what a jerk.
Yeah.
You got me into this and now you're shaming me and telling me to hide it because of something that you convinced me to do.
Right.
That's been his MO from the beginning. And so if you feel like you're alone, that's the exact place that he wants you to be. And I would challenge you to speak up about it because I can guarantee you there are men in your life that are just waiting for somebody to do it. And you have no idea what lies on the other side of somebody being honest. Like I even used to tell my story in a much more cryptic way than I do now. Like,
right.
And it took me years to use words like pornography and, sexual addiction and, lust. I would just say like, oh yeah, I like lived in sin. It didn't help anybody in my opinion. Like, it's not that it was unhelpful, just the stories that really impacted me that I can look back on and be like, wow, that story radically changed the way that I viewed this and actually helped me were the guys that were like, I'm not trying to impress anybody. This is my real story. I'm not embarrassed of it. Right. I'm a little bit ashamed of it, but when you bring something to light, is when, the bad stuff starts to die and the good stuff starts to grow. Only bad things grow in the dark. And so bringing it to the light, man, and just owning it is the first step in healing a lot of that. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing about that. I know that's
it helps somebody.
I know it's going to encourage single men out there. And so you're fighting now, you got accountability, and then you're like, all right, let me get out into the ocean and start fishing instead of just the sewage pond. How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So I decided that it was probably the best place to go fishing at church because that's the type of person that I was looking for. And that was the type of person that I wanted to become, even though in many ways I was not that person yet. I was still kind of playing that person.
Yeah.
By the way, when your private life and your public life begin to become the same, that is a very special moment. And it took me years to get there, right? They always kind of ran parallel to each other.
Yeah.
But if spiritual formation is anything, it's the merging of those two things, right? And it's either that your private life's going to come out in public, or it's that your public life is going to overcome and really, inundate your private life, and it's going to become something beautiful. So it's either going to become something that humiliates you or that humbles you. And I'd rather be humbled than humiliated.
Right.
So I decided, this is somewhere that I want to start looking for girls. And there's also like a really dangerous way to do that. And I've actually had some conversations with some guys that have almost made an environment like our young adult environment, like seem a little bit like they're fishing too hard.
Yeah.
Like this is not a meat market. Like this is a place where I want everyone to feel comfortable, and relationships, specifically like romantic relationships, those need to be secondary to the relationship that you find with Jesus out of this, environment. Our hope is that by becoming a better follower of Jesus or a better friend with Jesus, that you'll become a better friend with someone else. And if that's a relationship and one forms, then great. But we're not a dating, site. We're not a dating group. We're a young adults ministry. And so I had to kind of walk that line between like, oh, I know I want to find a girl here, but I don't want it to seem like I'm just like talking to anybody that has, two eyes and breathes. You know? So I'll tell you the moment that I met my wife. So I'm at church and I'm sitting next to one of my best friends who's actually my realtor and just walked this whole road with me this past week. So shout out to him. And I leaned over because I saw this girl out of the corner of my eye, and she was tall and she was blonde, which was not my type. My type was brunette, light skin, dark eyes. She was tall, blonde, light eyes, and kind of not light skinned or dark skinned, just kind of just regular white girl.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is that? And he goes, I don't know. I was like, she's cute. And he was like, yeah. So we served on different rotations. So I was just attending church that day. She was serving.
Okay.
And I was like, she looks really familiar. And I went to my phone because I was like, I think we were at the same birthday party a year ago. So I look her up because she had a name tag on.
Oh, yeah.
I look her up, and thankfully she spells her name a little bit weird, so she was pretty easy to find.
Right.
And I realized that the one mutual friend that we had was that girl whose birthday party it was that I thought I saw her at the birthday party.
Huh.
And so impulsively, I get up and I walk over to her. And I was like, hey, I'm Hamilton. Do you know, like, this girl?
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, we were sorority sisters together at UGA. And I was like, were you at her birthday party a year ago? She was like, yeah. I was like, I thought you were. Well, I just wanted to say hello. I didn't know you go to church here. Like, you know, like I said, I'm Hamilton. I serve on the shuttles team or whatever. She was like, oh, cool. Like, she's like trying to actively seat people in the auditorium. So I'm a big distraction at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, anyway, you know, nice to meet you. I just wanted to, you know, say hello, make the connection. So I go and sit down, and a few weeks later, it was a Love Atlanta like service project, and I was co-hosting that event, and I saw her name on the roster, which the odds of that happening is there are thousands of people that do these service projects. And so I was like, oh, heck yeah. So like I pulled her like name tag aside, and when she walked in, I was like, Alex, right? And she was like, yeah, do I know you? And I was like, oh, like, oh, you know, like, yeah, I'm Hamilton. I'm the idiot that walked up to you at church that day, you know?
Right.
And so we didn't really talk at the service project at all. But then that afternoon, coincidentally, I was going to South Africa to visit my sister who was studying abroad.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know is that she had gone home to her roommate, and her roommate was like, she had told her roommate about me. And she was like, oh, like, you should DM him and like try to get to know him. And so I landed in South Africa, and she had DM'd me. And was like, hey, like, it's great to see you again. I was like, let's go. So I spend the week in South Africa, and I come back, and this is the part of the story that she says I always skip out on. I ghosted her for like 6 weeks.
Really?
In my defense, there was another girl that my sister was trying to set me up with that predated her.
Yeah.
And I wanted to at least see it through. As to not like disrespect her because I'd already lined something up with her. Yeah. It ended up not working out. So I reached back out to my wife, Alex. Okay. And she, you know, agreed to hang out with me. But she still holds that over my head a little bit. So, yeah. Guys, don't think that you're going to get out from under like the embarrassing parts of your marriage story.
Right.
You end up getting through this, but
literally like that's one thing that I was starting to realized when I started dating my first girlfriend was like, well, this is going to be like our story. Like everyone's going to want to know what happened. And like, do I really want some of the stuff in my story? Like maybe not, you know? So that's cool.
But that's the truth, you know? Right. And like, even the parts that I'd like to leave out, the best stories to me are not the ones that are perfect. That's why scripture has all sorts of nasty stuff in it. It's not because it's what God wanted us to know about him. It's what he wanted us to know about him, despite all of the things that we've done to try to screw it up. Yeah. And not to hide that and be like, oh no, don't worry about that. But to really put that on display of like, man, looking back, I'm an idiot. Yeah. Like how stupid. Like I have this incredible girl that wants to, you know, get together with me. And so, thankfully I bit, and, we actually never ended up going on a first date necessarily. Okay. Like she was at church one day and I was there too, and my sister was at church as well. And we just decided to talk for like 2 hours at church before my sister showed up. And I was a huge distraction again. Like anybody you talk for 2 hours when you're serving is a huge distraction. But her captain for her serve team knew about us, and Alex had told her about me, and so she kind of allowed it, which was nice. Okay. Shout out to Abigail. And then I was like, hey, would you like to sit with my sister and me in church? So my sister is a brutal judge of character. Like I've never met a woman that my sister approved of to that point. Okay. So I was like, I'm going to know an answer real quick, one way or the other. Yeah. So I went to church, introduced her to my sister, Holland, and I sat her right in between my sister and me. Which is diabolical. But
you'll sit here.
Yeah, exactly. And Holland just like essentially interviewed her. Like it was like Shark Tank. Yeah. And at the end of it, Holland and I were walking to the car, and I was like, so what'd you think? She goes, this is the highest praise I've ever heard Holland give another woman in my life. She said, I can't find anything wrong with her. And I was like, I got to marry this girl because there's not another woman on the face of the planet that Holland will say that about. Wow. And so, yeah, took her flying, which is a cheap cheat code for pilots.
Yeah. First date.
Yeah. If you're not going to marry her, don't take her flying. I learned that the hard way. Because if you take them flying before you that's who you want to spend your life with, it can get you into a bad situation.
What do you mean?
They see the sunset and then they start to think about like, oh, we can go flying all the time. And then it kind of becomes an interesting ride. And it's hard to back out of it at that point. So
Okay.
I'm glad that Alex was like one of the only people that I took flying. But in hindsight, I wish she would have been the only person. So it would be kind of special just between us. But,
Right.
yeah. And then the rest is history. I ended up getting her a Bible. And she still uses that Bible. This was like our second date. And we had ice cream at the Frosty Caboose. And it was chill. It wasn't anything elaborate. It wasn't anything crazy. 6 months later, we're in quarantine together. I'm living in the basement of her parents' house for 3 weeks. And then she comes over to my parents' house for 3 weeks. And it just became this thing of, now that we know we can live together, now it's time to find out if we can live without each other. Because if you can think that you can live without somebody and you realize that you can't, might be an answer, So,
Yeah.
her parents were great and my parents loved her. And so there was a guy, he is still a friend of mine named Charles. He had us over for dinner one night.
Yeah.
And Alex goes to use the restroom or something. He looks at me, he goes, I can tell you really love her. It's like, yeah. He goes, you like her parents? I was like, yeah, I love her parents. He's like, you like her mom? I was like, yeah, I love her mom. She's great. You like her dad? I was like, yeah, we have great conversations in the basement. He goes, then quit being an idiot and marry her. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I was like, what? He goes, propose like tonight if you have to. Like, Charles happens to be a single man in his 40s. And he's like, dude, this, like, you're living like my dream. Like, just do it. What's wrong with you? And I was like, Charles, you're right. Like, I'm an idiot. Like, what am I waiting for?
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of a shift in my mind of like, I already know the answer. Like, why don't I just do this? Quit being a coward. So that's just me. That's not a shot to anybody.
How long was that? Like you all dated before you got engaged?
We dated, so we started dating in August of 2019 and then pandemic hit March of 2020. And then we got engaged June of 21.
Okay.
So we had dated for almost 2 years at that point.
Yeah.
And then we were engaged for 16 months.
Okay.
We got married in October of 22.
Okay.
So don't recommend that long of an engagement, but
yeah. So now being married, what's maybe like one or two things you wish you had known when you were still single? Like, okay, here's what it's like on the other side. Like,
yeah,
that's, I feel like this pedestal almost that single people in general are, okay, once I get married, like everything will be good. Like what would you wish you had known?
I was telling you this a little bit earlier, and I tell this to high school students when I get the chance to lead at our camp in Daytona. I said, guys, the thing that was not communicated to me about sex before marriage was the reality that I've just lived through. Was that one day, God willing, you find the woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with. And you have a deep enough relationship with her that you want to be honest and be fully known. Because if you can't be fully known in your marriage, there's nowhere that you can be fully known.
Right.
And you're going to have a conversation with her where you come clean. And that can be a really good conversation or it can be a really tough conversation. And for me, it was really tough. And you're explaining away name after name after name of a fun night that you can barely remember, but you can tell that it's causing so much pain to the person that you love the most.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it is that for every name that you explain away, that's someone who's having to explain you away to their spouse that you took something from that didn't belong to you. And dude, it still to this day is probably the most painful, but also the most beautiful and spiritually, maybe even formative day of my entire life was coming to the end of myself with the person that I want to give myself to and saying, here you go. The good, the bad, the ugly.
Right.
You get to peek under the hood. I'm tired of acting. I'm tired of playing this person that I want you to think that I am. And I want to start being the person that is actually worthy of you. And apart from me being honest with you, I'll never be worthy of you. So if I knew anything, it's that, you know, having now met my wife, that she was out there for me. And that's not a guarantee to anybody. Although I think the vast majority of people watching this very well might be married one day, which is great. And I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah.
That you have to approach dating as if you will meet that person one day and as if you will have a conversation with that person one day. And what do you want that narrative to be? How long do you want that conversation to go? And how many tears do you want it to shed on both sides? But specifically, how much pain do you want to inflict on that person? Because I inflicted a lot of pain. I lost a lot of trust with the person that I love the most. And thankfully she forgives me and we worked through it. But you know, it's tough.
Right.
It's tough hurting your best friend.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I would mention is there's two really great books. There's Single, Dating, Engaged, and Married by Ben Stewart, but also The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller is probably behind the Bible the second most recommended book that I tell people to get. Have you read it?
No, not
Oh,
yet.
dude.
I've been, so in our Bible study on Monday nights,
Yep.
we call it The Book.
Yeah.
And people get it when they start dating someone that they
Nice.
think is leading toward marriage.
Yep.
So I have the book, but I haven't read it. I've been waiting.
I would recommend you read it as a single guy.
Okay.
I read it as a single guy, and I read it again when I started dating Alex. And I would read it in every one of those stages. I would read it at least once as a single guy. I'd read it at least once as a dating guy. I'd read it at least once as an engaged guy, and I'd read it again as a married guy.
Okay.
I think, you know, kind of like scripture, it reads differently based on the experiences that you've had. And so as a single man, the meaning of marriage might seem like it has no relevance to you, but it will help you so much in trying to find the person that you're looking for based on the perspective that he gives. And the idea that there's this one perfect person out there that's looking for me as I am now and that's not going to expect me to change. It's like, it's a lot of me's, first off.
Yeah.
And he talks about the me marriage and like the lie that is me. I'm looking for somebody that's, you know, going to serve me. Well, if marriage is an institution where essentially Jesus uses the institution of marriage as the prime example of his relationship with the church, he didn't come down to the earth as, well, me, I'm doing this for me. It's like, hey,
Right.
I'm doing this for, well, the Father. I'm submitting to the will of the Father, but I'm doing it. I'm laying my life down for the church, for my bride. You know, we talk a lot about Ephesians 5, where it's, you know, wives submit to your husbands, and there's a lot of pain that verse has caused. But when you take it in context, that's the lesser of the two requirements. It's wives submit to your husbands, but it's husbands go and sacrifice for your wives as Christ did for the church. And it's like, dang, he died for the church. Like,
Yeah.
I'll submit all day long. You just don't ask me to die, you know? Like when we take that out of context, it's like, wow, he's asking so much more of us. And I tell guys all the time, especially when they're having issues in their marriage, my wife's just, you know, we're having so much difficulty. I said, well, how well of a job are you doing treating her like Jesus treats her? Because you never have to worry about your wife submitting to you in a godly way if you are treating her as well as her Savior does. Only when you stop treating her similarly as she's being loved by Jesus will you have a problem in your marriage.
Yeah.
And when you approach it that way, you're like, wow, I've got a lot of work to do.
Right.
But maybe the last point, and we're
Yeah.
probably out of time. I want to end on this.
Yeah.
This is my hot take. You ready?
Yeah.
I talk with guys all the time, specifically single guys, and I have a lot of people that come up to me and they're like, I don't know if I want to get married, you know, if it's like the cards for me. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people maybe misprioritize their identities or identity markers, and they're like, oh, I'm a single Christian guy. It's like, you listed single first. Is that your primary identity marker? Or are you a Christian guy who happens to be relationship status single?
Right.
I think that's a much more theologically healthy place to be, right? Singleness is not a defining attribute. At least it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You know, it should be, I'm a loved and chosen son or daughter of God who happens to be single in this season, right?
Right.
And whether that's a decision that you continue to make or that's, you know, God's will for your life or not is a different conversation. But here's my hot take. I look at guys where I absolutely see a future where they are married and have a beautiful, godly marriage and godly family. And that's not me saying I'm prophesying. That's not me saying I can see the future. I can just see a reality in which that seems more reasonable to me than a reality with them not having a wife, not having a family, and same thing for women, but specifically with guys.
Yeah.
And I say, you know what? Here's something I've thought a lot about. In John 10:10, Jesus says, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full or abundantly.
Yeah.
Which is the, primary verse for the book that I published a couple of years ago. No shameless plug here, but it's a very important verse to me.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the enemy, right, which we have to believe in the reality of because Jesus himself validates that. And if you believe that Jesus is who he claimed to be and he validates that there's a thief, an enemy that's trying to kill, steal, and destroy, that this being exists.
Right.
Then I'm like, okay, if you read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, oh, dude, so good.
Yeah.
But essentially the book is about these demons and their strategy to take down their client or so you get to understand what the strategy of Satan or demons might be. And it got me thinking about okay, maybe picture myself as okay, I'm on the other team. How do I really take people down? Well, we look at what the primary example or metaphor that God uses to explain himself to us is with familial ties. Father, we talk about, brothers in Christ, sisters in Christ, this family unit of the church being a body and a familial body of brothers and sisters. And God has chosen to use the family as his primary means of helping us to understand who he is and the relationship that he has, not only with us, but within the Trinity.
Right.
How do I destroy that? Well, I start attacking the family, right? And we look around. I mean, look at the world. You don't have to look far to realize that the family unit is under attack between divorce rates and fatherless homes, and just look around. It's a catastrophe. It's an epidemic, in my opinion. But Satan, being who he is, and not to over spiritualize this, but he's lazy. And by he's lazy, he doesn't want to work that hard.
Yeah. Just keep using the same tactics.
So what do? If I can prevent the family, I don't have to work to destroy it. How do you prevent the family? Well, you separate people to the point where they accept singleness as the only viable option. So you never have to worry about them having a romantic relationship with someone, which means you never have to worry about destroying a godly marriage, which means you never have to worry about attacking that marriage so that you can destroy godly kids. And we live in a day where I feel like Satan has become so lazy that he has now used something like the pandemic to separate us from ourselves and maybe convince people that could have a godly relationship with a godly spouse and have a godly, God-honoring family to forego that altogether so he doesn't have to work so hard. And I'm not saying that that's your situation, and I'm not saying that that's any single person's situation. That is a conversation you need to have between you and God.
Yeah.
But doesn't it make sense? Theologically, when I think through my seminary training, which is not exhaustive, but when I think about who he is and the experience that I've had with both the enemy and also who God is and the experience that I've had with him, and being in a relationship with my wife where there is no other relationship that a human can have where you are able to live out and act out and work out a relationship that helps you to understand the relationship of the Trinity, right? Marriage is that.
Yeah.
That wives submit to your husbands, but husbands submit to the will of their wives. And it's just glorify, or exalt and submit and exalt and submit. It's like, man, I understand God better by the relationship that I have with my wife, because that's a relationship that Christ has with the church.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I don't think I would have much of an understanding of God, especially what he's taught me in just this last year and a half. And we are so just scratching the surface. So I can't wait till, we get to see more of it. It's not perfect. And there are really hard days, really, really hard days, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So if you're struggling with that, if you're wondering, is this for me? You're ready to give up, reach out to one of us. I'm happy to talk with you. You're welcome to give out my contact information. You might not find any value in this conversation. That's fine too. But I've tried to be as honest as I can. And it just makes too much sense that Satan would, really want to put us in a corner and just, he's a coward, dude. Yeah. He's a coward. Yeah. And so I don't care about calling him out. He's going to come for me. He comes for me every day. Right. I might have to relay my foundation in my house again, whatever, but it's worth it to expose him for who he is.
Yeah.
Because by exposing Satan for who he is, I think we also exposed how good God is. And that's the relationship I get to live out in my marriage. So
Yeah. So great, man. That's
yeah,
awesome.
dude. So
Last thing I want to ask you. So someone just sat here, listened to the whole episode, right? Yeah. Okay. This guy Hamilton, cool story. Like awesome to see the change in his life. Sounds like it's really working out for him, maybe even, right? Like it seems like he's got it together. Okay. If you could talk to the guy that is like, okay, questioning, is singleness for me? Like, okay, I've been in this lifestyle. Is church for me? Maybe I've never been to a church. Maybe I'm in a different religion altogether right now. Like, what would be the one takeaway you'd want someone, all right, maybe write this down. Maybe actually like take an action from this whole conversation. What would that one thing be?
You ready for this?
Ready.
It's not about you. My entire, being, my every moral fiber within my being wants to just make it about me, whether it's dating or my relationship or my spiritual growth is my. That is maybe more than any other reason why this might feel like such a stressful experience or why there might be so much pressure is because you're making it about you.
Yeah.
At least that was in my experience.
Yeah.
When my relationships got so much richer, when I started realizing, wow, a relationship is all about how much more I can give to the person than how much I can get. My dad always told me, he was like, best dating advice I can give you is when you are done, whether it's the woman that you spend the rest of your life with or it's somebody that you never see again, being able to say when you leave, I left them better than I found them. You will never have to worry about dating in a godly way if you always can live with yourself on the backside of a relationship saying that I genuinely left that person better than I found them. But that is not the relationships that we peddle in our society. It's what can we get out of that relationship? Then it's transactional. A godly relationship is not transactional. It's the deposits need to be much larger than the withdrawals.
Yeah.
But if each of you is making a larger deposit in the other than withdrawing, my goodness.
Right.
That's how your bank account, if you made more deposits than your withdrawals in the bank account, it's simple math. You don't have to be a PhD in economics. Like it's going to be up and to the right, Yeah. It's not about you. It's not, in a lot of ways, it's not even about her or him. It's about him, right? And in drawing nearer to him, you draw nearer to each other, right? It's that triangle of, God's at the top and you guys are at the bottom of this triangle, but you'll never be able to draw nearer to each other but by drawing nearer to the top of the triangle, you do draw nearer to each other. It's this line that goes up. And so maybe it's cliche, but it's not about you. It should be high stakes, low pressure. That's how ministry should feel.
Yeah.
High stakes, low pressure. When it starts to feel like high stakes, high pressure, you might have confused your role with the Holy Spirit. So don't fill up so much space with just thinking about you or thinking about the situation at hand that you don't leave room for the Holy Spirit to do only what he can do. I can't put Alex in that room that morning.
Yeah.
I can't make her interested in me. I can't put her on that roster for that Love Atlanta project.
Have her at the birthday party.
I can't put her at the birthday party. I can't put Holland in that room that morning at church. Like there's so many ways that I felt like, thank God I left a little room, even despite me trying to fill it up all with me.
Yeah.
That I let him work and he'll take whatever you're willing to give him and he'll move and work in a way that you can't even imagine. So it's not about you. And I learned that the hard way. So if you learn anything today, I hope you learn it quicker than I did so you can not experience so much pain and as much pain as I did and a lot more fruit. So
yeah, amazing. Wow, such a great conversation, Hamilton. So grateful for you coming on. And if you're not watching on YouTube, go back and watch this again on YouTube. We're wearing the exact same outfit almost.
Yeah.
And
no, we did not plan this.
Yeah, I love it. And just so grateful for you, Hamilton, and your friendship and leadership in my life. And I think this story is going to help a lot of single men out there. So I'm believing God's going to use it and amplify it. And grateful for your support.
Well, thank you. This is an incredible ministry opportunity, but also just an incredible outworking of what God is doing in you. And so on behalf of all of us who get to benefit from the person that is Carlton French. Thank you for just being you. So, and thanks for letting me be a part of what you're working on. It's really cool.
Thank you so much, Hamilton. I appreciate everybody listening to this week's episode. If you found it beneficial or think it would encourage a friend of yours, I would encourage you to text the link to them, tell them, hey, check out this guy Hamilton's story. Or maybe there's like another friend of yours that, you know, you're going through something hard and you want to find a accountability partner or something, like, hey, maybe check this out. Would you want to be in this conversation with me going forward? And hope it bless you. Have a great rest of your Friday. We'll be back next week for a new episode. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.